Record on the computer now that I just said hot Professor Summer. Oh wait, I now recorded. Okay, that's fine. It's too hilarious to not record. Um, so as you probably saw in the email I just sent you a minute ago or an hour ago, I graded your papers very generally. We don't even need to talk about this much, but they were pretty good. I feel like the best papers were able to answer the question of what is Buddhist modernism. That was kind of the secret task that was inserted into the paper. I don't know if you picked up on my secret task, but what is Buddhist modernism? And obviously we went over that in a lot of detail before, but just here's a little overview. I'm not even going to read it to you, but Buddhism changed over the last 100 years, right? And it's important to bring our attention to that. It's important to recognize that a lot of Buddhism classes like this one basically only give you this, right? Only give you Buddhist modernism. But as we said with the blind man and the elephant, that's only part of the story, right? If we just hold on to the trunk and say this is an elephant, we are ignoring the tusk and the tail and all the other pieces. And so if we just hold on to Buddhist modernism and say this is the whole Buddhism, this is the whole Buddhism story, that also is not very fair to the rest of Buddhism, right? And what ends up happening is something we even saw in this reading. I don't know if you noticed, but there was like, you have real Buddhism and then you have animism and popular religion. Did you notice that split? If you didn't, I'll bring your attention to it later. But it's the same thing that happens in most studies of Buddhism. And like I said, this book is new. It's a new way of thinking about Buddhism. It's more inclusive of what we could say the cultural aspects of Buddhism brought over, for example, by Asian Americans to America. That is Buddhism too. No doubt. That's not cultural baggage. That's not just extra. It's not just animism. And so again, these pieces might feel a little weird and uncomfortable. They're not what we necessarily expect from Buddhism. But that's why I gave you that assignment, is to let you think about it a little bit. And frankly, most of you fell into the trap of saying, oh yeah, Buddhist modernism is pretty sweet, magic's kind of weird, but whatever. That's kind of what half the paper said. And that's fine. Again, the goal was to get you to think about these things. You don't have to, follow the Buddhist magical approaches that I'm promoting here. And one reason you might not want to is it's pretty weird, right? And so we can go into all the weird details, right? And so, again, we're not here to necessarily follow it. A lot of the things I give to you, I'm subtly suggesting are actually very helpful. And frankly, I believe that they are helpful, which is why I give them to you. The magic stuff maybe is less directly helpful, right? But we should still study it if for no other reason as anthropologists, right? You guys know what anthropologists do? What do anthropologists study? I think we said this last time, didn't we? Study of human culture. That's very nicely stated, right? Because anthro refers to people. I think technically man, but let's say people. And then what anthropologists really do now is study culture. So that's exactly right. Study of human culture. So we don't have to subscribe, right? We don't have to follow Buddhist magic, but I do want you to understand it. That's the goal here. It occupies a weird position in Buddhism itself. This slide is from last time, but I don't think we got to it. So I want to make sure we go over it today. And it'll be relevant for Nangnak, the story we'll discuss today. It'll be relevant for your extra credit assignment. Have you guys looked at that yet? Let's look at it. Maybe that's a good way to introduce these categories. Assignments, extra credit. So I won't even open it. I'll just do this preview thing. So yeah, very straightforward. It's basically I'm saying, hey, watch a movie and analyze it. The movie is Nangnak. It's the same story that we'll discuss today. So it's nothing new. Well, it won't be anything new after this class. I'll introduce it to you this class. And I bring up this triad here, which is on the slide. We've got the monk, the wizard, and the adept. And this is kind of, I'm drawing from a lot of different pieces to put this together. I would give you a reading on this if I knew of one. Again, what I'm sharing with you is kind of like my research. Maybe I'll write this article one day, the monk, the wizard, and the adept. But I think, again, this is a good way to think about magic and where does it fit in Buddhism. Because if you feel weird about this magic stuff, you're not alone. A lot of Buddhists feel weird about it too. And so when we read this story of Nanak, it's not totally made explicit, but it goes to show that these magical spirits occupy kind of an ambiguous space. They don't not exist. They do exist. They are definitely a part of Buddhism, but they're not like always celebrated, right? Sometimes they're sort of pushed down below, which is why they don't show up in Buddhist modernism. It's very easy to cut that stuff out, right? Because they're already being pushed below. But I think it's important to recognize them because regardless of whether we see it or not, these sorts of spirits and forces and symbols and ideas that they represent do operate in our own lives. So that's one argument I'm going to present to you today. So anyways, it's on Netflix. I found kind of a bad quality version on YouTube that we'll watch a little bit from today. I encourage Netflix if you have it. Obviously, I don't buy it just for this assignment. But if you already have it, watch it on Netflix. And I just gave you a pretty straightforward question, pretty open-ended question. What does this story tell us about Buddhism? And I wrote in lay society. Do you know what lay society means? We've talked about lay people before, haven't we? Who are lay people? Digging back to part 1 review sheet, I think it was on there. That means it's fair game for the rest of class. I can quiz you. What are lay people?
Lay people are, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Lay people are people who like aren't like a priest or a nun or anything like that, like part of general society that still like celebrate their religion. So like they still follow like the basic structure of their religion, but they're not like in the structure of the religion per se, but they still follow it.
Okay.
Like we're lay people pretty much.
We are lay people. That's right. I am a lay person. And I highlighted, I don't think I used this word, but I highlighted that's a little bit weird that I'm a professor of Buddhism and yet I'm a lay person, right? In traditional Buddhist society, that would be very rare to have somebody be kind of this scholastic representative of Buddhism and be a lay person. That almost never would happen in traditional Buddhist society. Jocelyn, what were you going to say? Mm-hmm. So I like these discussions. It goes to show it's actually sort of a hard term to define. It's a little hard to nail down precisely. The biggest difference, the biggest single difference, there are many, but the biggest single difference is lay people are not celibate, right? Monks and nuns are celibate. They wear robes. They take vows. They follow what's called the Vinaya, the discipline for monks and nuns. We didn't spend too much time on it, frankly, because it's kind of boring, but it is important in the sense that it defines what a monk or nun is as opposed to a layperson, right? We saw Angulimala, right? That's a story of a layperson becoming a monk. So anyways, lay society. So this story is about Buddhism, I would argue. It's not only about Buddhism, and it's also kind of scary. If you don't like scary movies, maybe you don't want to do this. So that's why it's extra credit. It's a horror film, but it's also about love, and it's not like the really super scary horror films. It's not like The Exorcist or something like that. Have you guys seen The Exorcist? Do you know this film? Classic. Scared the crap out of me when I was a kid. It's from like the 70s. It was already an old film when I was growing up. I encourage you to look for it if you're into horror films. That movie scared the crap out of me when I was a kid. I feel like this movie is more, it's a different emotional tone. It's definitely scary. There's a little bit of gore. So, this is your warning. I guess I could put that into writing in case anybody finds this assignment and is not hearing this warning. But there is some gore. And if you don't like horror films, then perhaps this is not for you. I could come up with an alternative one. If you want to do extra credit and you don't want to watch this, we could also figure something else out. It's just sort of a perfect film for what we're talking about. So anyways, yeah, Buddhism in lay society is kind of from a lay perspective, right? It's not from the perspective of the monks and nuns. Are there nuns? There might not be any nuns, but monks are major characters in this film. So, but they're presented more from the side of lay society. Okay, so that's the assignment. Any questions about this? It's due in about a month. I guess 3 or 4 weeks. Okay, so this is on the docket now. You might want to wait until after the next exam. This won't be due until after that. If you do great on both exams, you can pass on this. If you just want to see this movie, watch it, and you don't have to write a paper. Do whatever you want. But yes, it's not due until the 22nd, so feel free to keep that in mind. So as we come back to this, here are those categories again. We've got this Buddhist scholar. I think I called him the village monk in the assignment. Slightly different categories, but what are these? So these are monks. They're celibate, right? And they read and write books. They live in a monastery. Again, they're the scholars. They're the ones that I've replaced by being, an American professor. I read and write books, but I don't live in a monastery. I live at a university. No, I don't actually live here. Do you guys think that I live here? Like upstairs? I have a room up there. I just come downstairs in the morning. No, I do live nearby though. So this is kind of what I represent now, right? I'm the Buddhist scholar, and that's what happens with Buddhist modernism. The Buddhist wizard doesn't really exist anymore, at least not in our society. In traditional societies, they do. In, for example, Tibetan society, there's a figure called the Ngakpa, and Ngak means spell, and it's those spells that we were seeing in the Book of Spells, right? So Ngakpa is somebody who can do these spells. They do exist now. Things like weather control, like we talked about, healing rituals, like we talked about. They're the ones who are in charge of that sort of thing. They're not all over Tibet, but there's certain communities where anthropologists go and hang out with them and kind of try to figure out what they do. So again, different term than this Buddhist wizard from before, but you don't have to worry about that. For us, the Buddhist wizard is this Vidyadhara, the knowledge holder. It's usually a layperson. And here's a picture of one whom I happen to like a lot. His name's Padmasambhava. He starts out as sort of a wizard-like figure. Does he look like a wizard to you? Not sure? What makes you say that? He doesn't have a pointy enough hat? He has a special hat, though. It's just not pointy. It's even a little bit pointy, isn't it? Let's see. Staff's right here, bro. It's got a staff. Yeah. It's even got skulls on it. Let's look up a more high definition image. I like that image because it's an old one, but let's just look up Padmasambhava. Padmasambhava. His name means lotus born. People call him the second Buddha in Tibet. He's a very specific Tibetan figure. He comes from the outside. Yeah, here's a giant statue of him in northern India. What about now? Does he look like a wizard? Eastern wizard. Yeah, well, that's basically what he is. Yeah. Yeah, and he's got the Vajra here. Can you see the Vajra? He's got a Vajra on his head. Skulls and severed heads on his staff here. Trident kind of thing on fire. Big eyes, like remarkably big eyes. That's sort of a reference to a practice that he's famous for called the Great Perfection. It's a lot like Zen, actually. I would teach Great Perfection. There's not a lot of good materials on it. It's sort of like it assumes you know Tibetan in order to learn these things. So if you want to learn that stuff, go to grad school. But we will learn similar things for Zen in the third part. So it's sort of like a Tibetan Zen that he's famous for. He's holding a skull cup here. That's, obviously it's not a real human skull, but there are real human skulls that are made into cups. And as you can see, it's this enormous statue. People like him. So he starts off as this wizard kind of figure. Here are his wives. He has two wives. One is Tibetan and one is Indian. We got to shrink now. Come on, there it goes. So he is not celibate. It might look like he's wearing robes, like monk robes, but these are actually special, we could just say wizard robes. Nobody calls them that, but for this class, that'll sort of make sense. He's a layperson. He's not celibate. Arguably, as a wizard, maybe you wouldn't call him a layperson exactly, but if our definition is celibate versus not celibate, he is not celibate, and he does these magical instructions. So if you think, who would perform this book of spells, here's your answer. It's someone like him. And then finally, there's someone kind of in between. You might feel like, okay, we've got the scholar, we've got the wizard. They're very separate, right? You get that impression? It's almost like Buddhist modernism versus Buddhist magic. Separate. There's not really much room in between. Somebody, I forget who it was. Actually, maybe I remember who it was. I won't call you out. But somebody wrote in their paper that, hey, can't magic be a form of meditation? I was like, yes, it can be. That's right. We have our headspace meditation, and that sort of dominates most conversations about what is meditation, mindfulness. But how is this so different? Doing this sort of magical stuff is different. way of imagining, right? We had Tara. Tara is a nice way to sort of link the headspace practice to the magical practices. You could think of it as a type of meditation. And maybe that's a question I can ask on an exam or something, is how does it change, right? If we think about Buddhist magic as a form of meditation, right? As opposed to just straight up some kind of ritual. Again, we've gone through this a lot, so I'm just gonna try to hit some spots we missed because the Nong Nok story is not very content heavy. It takes place in Thailand. I frankly am not an expert of Thailand. I don't know Thai. I do know I am an expert of this, right? So I've read this very book. I've written about it. So I have a ton that I can say about this. So I'm gonna finish with the magic, and then we can go through Nong Nok quickly, and then we won't meet on Thursday. You guys aware of this? There's no class on Thursday, so we can finish Nong Nok early next week. I guess 1 week from today. There's no rush with these things. So did we get to this slide?
Actually, Professor.
Yes, Sam.
Can you hear us? Yeah, our next class is on Wednesday, actually.
Oh, you're right. Oh, yeah. Let's settle this. I should have opened the syllabus because we are on a special week. Yeah, you're right. So it's all in the syllabus if you're ever confused. Monday schedule on Wednesday. Thank you for pointing that out. And we'll talk about the guru. And these two are pretty similar topics. So yeah, there's no rush to crunch these things away. Did we, again, thanks, Sam. Did we talk about the offering cakes? Is this a familiar slide? I feel like we skipped this, didn't we? Does anybody remember an offering cake? I think I talked with Raina about it after class, but we didn't cover this, did we? Yes, no? We can skip it if we already talked about it. Did we talk about it? I don't think so, right? So here they are. One reason I want to do this is because they're actually very aesthetically pleasing, right? Look at these offering cakes. So can you tell what this is made out of? There's a little bit of a clue by calling it an offering cake. What do you think the brown part is? Are you not interested in playing this game? What do you think the brown part is? Cake? Okay, what's cake made out of? Flour, yes, it is flour, and not with a W, but with a U. They look like flowers with a W, but yeah, this is flour. It's made out of barley, roasted barley flour, which in Tibetan is called tsampa, and so it's a very common thing to eat. And so you take this it's almost like in the morning you eat cereal or something, and it's kind of like this reconstituted flour, right? That's put into a Cheerio or whatever. It's very similar to that. And this is breakfast for many Tibetan people. In fact, there's a lot of diversity in Tibetan culture, and something that ties them together really is this. There's a movement to call them the tsampa eaters. The Tibetans call themselves tsampa eaters. So this is tsampa, which of course there's no way you can know that, but it is flour. It is roasted barley flour. What about the white part or the colorful part? Can you tell what that is? Icing on the cake? It kind of looks like icing, right? But it's not. What do you think this is? That's a harder question, actually. What's another important cake ingredient? You guys ever made a cake before?
Sugar.
Say it again. Sugar?
Sugar?
It is not sugar. We have to think.
Oh.
How do you get sugar in the old world? What plant does that come from? This is actually a very important part of the slave trade. So maybe I can digress about this.
You mean like sugar cane?
Sugar cane, yeah. Sugar cane does not grow in the Himalayas, right? That does not grow at high altitude. That was grown in, the Caribbean or something. And again, that was the beginning of the slave trade. Do you know what you can make out of sugar? Obviously you can make sugar out of sugar cane, but what is also made from sugar that was so important in the slave trade? What did Jack Sparrow drink? Rum. Alcohol. So that's the beginning of the slave trade. But anyways, this is not sugar. This is something else. What else is in a cake? Close. Does that look like an egg? No, it's not an egg. It is an animal product, though. Say again. Processed milk, churned. What happens when you churn milk? Butter is butter. These are butter sculptures. So that's another important part of Tibetan culture, samba and butter. And when you put samba and butter together, you can mold it into things and it becomes like Play-Doh. So that's what this is. It's an offering cake. The ritual obviously doesn't tell you how to make them, but now that we know what they are, maybe I should give you more anecdotes. Today's a good day for anecdotes. At Tibetan monasteries, if you go there, you will find enormous ornate statues completely made out of butter. It's unbelievable. And they'll melt if it gets warm, right? So you gotta like make them in the fall, and maybe they'll last for the winter. So yeah, pretty crazy stuff. Using butter to make these cakes. One reason I'm highlighting that it's a cake is because it's food that you can eat, right? And if you think about what a human relationship would be with this cake, hopefully now you see it as food that you can eat, and you can think, what purpose does this serve? There is a sense of you're giving this food to perhaps a spirit or something like that. So what's the practice here? Just very quickly, let's say there's a sick person, and I'm the wizard. I can tie some thread to the sick person and tie the other end of the thread to the cake, say the magic spell, draw the sickness out of them, right? This is something you guys wrote about, is the sickness is, there's a very good word for this that most of you won't know. It's reify. Have you ever heard this word, reify? Probably not. Latin roots, anyone? Res, rei, rem. What is rei? Does it say? It's a thing. Good. I would have been embarrassed if I was wrong. So yeah, it comes from Latin. It's a thing. It means to thingify. So if you ever want to say thingify, don't say thingify, say reify. See, we're learning things here. So it reifies the disease. It turns it into a thing, right? An object, something you can manipulate. And so all of a sudden the sickness is drawn out of the person, put into the offering cake. And then what do? Where does it say? Oh, maybe I didn't copy it. But what you do, oh yeah, I wrote it here. You throw it into a road. Why would you do that? Why would you throw this now diseased offering cake into a road? So it gets squished. Why do you want to squish the diseased offering cake? Exactly, the disease dies too. It's a scapegoat ritual. Have you heard of scapegoats before? See, we're learning all kinds of good stuff today. Scapegoat. What's a scapegoat? Takes the blame. I heard a rustling in the chat. Did someone want to talk? Just wanted to rustle? Yeah. So we could do this to a person instead of an offering cake, couldn't we? Could you imagine that? Draw the sickness, put it into someone, and then what do you do with that someone? Knock them out, right? In some ways, we did that with Trump. Now that he's gone, everything's getting better. Obviously, it's not purely ritualized in attaching COVID to Trump, but it absolutely can be if you want it to be, right? He's more responsible than this offering cake was, but it's a similar sort of emotional practice. Okay, questions about this? Similar use of barley flour here. We can make frogs and imagine frogs kind of sucking liquid out. This is actually relevant because it talks about dragons. Did you guys pick up on the dragons when you were going through this? So this is also important because the name Nangnak, the name Nak, the name of the main character here, is tied to this word for dragon. The Sanskrit word is Naga. So it's a little bit of a leap, but Nak and Naga, a ga and a ka, both come from kind of the back of your throat. I think it's called the glottal sound. So it's the same sound. And so in some ways, this story is a story about these dragons. It's about a dragon woman. Now, of course, the story itself does not explain itself that way, right? But if we're scholars looking for sort of historical, symbolic background, we can find connections between these nagas and Nangla. We'll return to that idea in a moment. But the takeaway here is these nagas are responsible for disease. There's a sense that it's the dragons that make us sick. And so this one is symbolically a little complicated. You make a frog out of barley flour, you add some ointments inside of it, like we talked about last time. There are some medical ideas presented here, right? Putting, what was it, the ash from a leaf or something, or like the pulp from some sort of ground up leaf onto the skin. Here, it doesn't tell us what the ointments are, so it's not so medically helpful. But it tells us to put ointments into this cake frog, right? You're making another cake in the shape of a frog, put ointments in it, put it on the skin problem. And then if you lift up the frog, this liquid emerges and the patient will definitely recover. There's actually a lot of other details. And then if it doesn't work, it says just do it again. This is often the case with magical rituals, right? If it works, then great. If it doesn't work, it's probably your fault. Do it again, right? So it's another, we could say, detail that comes with magic. So in any case, why do you think a frog is being chosen here? Can anybody make sense of the logic? That was also part of the assignment, right? Was to think about the logic of these rituals. And that was frankly a little lacking, but it's also, you either sort of get it or you don't. So I didn't take off points or anything. What do you think? What's the logic of the frog? Well, from what I've told you, and I've given you the information you need, what makes someone sick? What gives you the skin disease? And in case you're wondering, I think this is probably the bubonic plague, right? Because if you think about one giant sore, right, and kind of extracting the fluid from that sore, that sounds pretty plague-like to me. That's, again, a tangent from my own research. But why do you think a frog? What makes you sick according to this particular ritual? What's the logic of it? I just told you, didn't I? What makes you sick? What gives you the sores? The sores are, let's call that the symptom, but what is the underlying root cause that is making the sores appear? According to this ritual, who's making you sick? The dragons. The dragons are making you sick. They're existing, so they're like these water spirits, and you like pee on the spring water that everybody drinks from or something, they're gonna make you sick. If you piss them off, they're gonna make you sick. If you dig in the wrong place, they're gonna make you sick. So these are vengeful spirits that make you sick. What does a frog have to do with a dragon? That's the real question here. What do you think? They kind of look the same, don't they? Have you ever seen a dragon before? Have you ever seen a frog before? Well, there you go. Right? It's almost like I talked to a Tibetan monk one time. I went to visit him, and there was a frog outside of his door, and he kind of freaked out. He really didn't like it. And I was like, what's wrong? And he's like, he's the friend. I think he used the word punya, and I didn't know what punya meant. He said it's the messenger of the dragons, right? So these dragons don't really show up. They're just kind of out in the background. They're underground, right? They're there, but we don't have access to them. These are their messengers. They send them up. And so in a way, it's putting the disease back where it came from. It's saying, oh, you're coming up to bring some disease to me? Here, let me fill your mouth with my horrible serum and take it down to your subterranean masters. Okay, questions about this? Again, we went through these things a little too briefly, I think, for you to get the full logic. But you got to think about it for the assignment. Now we can kind of complete the thought. This one's interesting. Maybe in the interest of time, we can just kind of skip through it. But again, it's reifying disease, right? It's taking a disease, thinking of it as a material concept that you can trap under your bed. There's an interesting play on words here. They're talking about names. Why do you think we would put the name of a person in a trap under a bed? What does the name have to do with disease? Have you ever heard anything like this before? I feel like, do you know the book The Wizard of Earthsea? Have you ever read that? Ursula Le Guin. I read it when I was real little. I must have been middle school or something. But there was something about naming there. There's a power in knowing the name of things. You know, again, magic, right? What's the logic of the name here? So we're supposed to put the name of the sick person in a hidden place under the bed. On the paper. Yeah, exactly. On the paper with the name on it. Exactly. Yeah. I liked how you're thinking about soul, right? Because it is almost like transferring sort of like a fake soul onto this piece of paper and putting it under the bed. And maybe you've heard there's sort of superstitions about paper. If I write my name, or let's say I write somebody else's name on this and I step on it, that's bad mojo, right? And that's why actually a monk was giving me a hard time about this. Sometimes I have Buddhas on my phone, right? Like here's a cool ice Buddha. I think it's very cool, and I mean no disrespect, but then what do I do with my phone? I put it in my pants. It's all next to my crotch and stuff, right? It's not exactly the most respectful way to treat a picture of the Buddha, is it? And so there was this monk giving me a hard time for the Buddha on my phone. I was like, all right, bro. All right, bro. I'm a secular teacher over here. I'm going to keep a Buddha on my phone. Thank you very much. So in any case, there's something similar happening here, right? By putting the name of the sick person on the piece of paper, it is tricking the spirit that will cause the disease and trapping it under the bed. And maybe last one, did we talk about this, pregnancy? This is also, it's relevant for Nongnak in the sense that there's kind of some interesting gender concerns here. And pregnancy is a big part of Nongnak as well. Pregnancy is dangerous. You guys are aware of this, right? I mean, even now it is dangerous. I think there's some disturbing statistics that of the sort of civilized world, to use a charged term, women in America die at very high rates. I can't explain why that might be, but death at childbirth is a non-zero chance, right? It is a scary event. It's a dangerous event. And before that, right, having a child in your womb has all sorts of medical complications, and they don't always stay in the womb, right? Chrissy Teigen kind of came out and talked about this. It's a very difficult and uncomfortable topic, and she bravely brought kind of a national conversation to this topic. So I apologize if I'm being a bit cavalier about this. I think I often am when I talk about these topics, but it's the only way I know how. And so this says, well, let's just read it. If a demon comes for your unborn child, you must quickly grab a 5-pointed Vajra. Do you remember Vajra? What's Vajra? Vajrayana. I translate it as the adamantine vehicle. Remember the image, the Vajra, sort of the ritual symbol, little weapon. Padmasambhava was holding one earlier. Let's see, does he have one here? Oh, he might not. That'd be surprising, actually. Yeah, I think he has one. It's just really blurry. So Vajra, it's a symbol of power. It's a weapon, right? I'm not going to look it up again, but you find it in your notes. And you say to these demons, I bind you with the 5 fetters and offer you the 5 kinds of puja. So you're doing 2 things. You're tying them up. You're also making an offering to them, right? And again, the logic is what? They're coming for your child. They want something, and so you got to give them something. Otherwise, they're going to take it from you, right? Scary, frightening, but again, it's trying to take those difficult emotions that Chrissy Teigen was playing with. Sorry, not playing with, but expressing, and it is playing with those, right? It is trying to give you tools to manipulate those scared anxieties about losing a child. And then imagine that fulfilling their vows, many goddesses come from the sky to protect your womb and make your child stay there. When you thwart a demon with this method, its head will burst into 7 parts like the fruit of the arjaka. And I looked this up. It's like a fruit that you can easily break into many parts. So pretty evocative, right? It's like, you're coming for my baby? I'm going to smash your head, demon. Right? You are not powerless in this equation. In fact, you have a great amount of power. In fact, that's the point, right? It's to give you power against these threatening forces. That's why it's uncomfortable. It's because we often don't have it. And that's, again, something that you guys wrote about. Someone wrote about the COVID pinata that we talked about, right? These rituals are designed to give you power. Now you might argue, but it doesn't really, and I would argue it doesn't really matter, does it, right? It gives you a sense of power in a moment where you might in fact just be powerless, like right now, right? Okay, one thing I want to draw your attention to is there are good goddesses, bad demons and good goddesses, right? The good goddesses take a vow. Maybe you notice that. Come to the sky to protect your womb, fulfilling their vow. So they vowed to protect us. Have we seen vows of protection and taking away suffering and all that before? Of course we have, right? So we see that here. The goddesses made a vow. They vowed to protect you and the unborn child in your womb, and they are making good on that vow. So it's doing two things at once. It's introducing this dangerous force, but it's also introducing this benevolent protective force and basically saying, here are the tools to manipulate those forces. Questions? How's that all sound? So that's magic for you. Just a little sampling. Again, it's an archaeological document. It's not like it was designed for, I mean, Sam Van Skyke's book was designed for this class, but the actual book that it's translated from, which is the only section I gave to you, it was designed for use, right? I mean, these are just real instructions that are in this book, and we got to assume they were probably really doing it, right? At least in some capacity, because why else would you write them down? I mean, maybe someone taught this to the monk and then he never actually did it, which is sort of like what I'm doing, right? I'm teaching it to you guys and you're not actually going to do it. But I think especially because this is so unique, it was just found in this one cave. It's not translated from some big tradition, like from Indian traditions or Chinese traditions or anything like that. It just is in this cave. This is the only copy of this book anywhere in the world. And you got to assume somebody wrote it for a reason, right? And it's probably to learn and potentially practice these traditions. Okay, so that is that. This is very old. Now we're jumping to today. Hooray, right? The modern day. Has anybody been to Bangkok? Where is Bangkok? What country? No pressure. What? Say again? Yes, very good. It is in Thailand. So Southeast Asia, Thailand, very good. This is a Southeast Asian story. Again, I'm not an expert of Thailand. I can't give you as many interesting anecdotes as I just did about Tibet. But at the same time, it's a famous story, and I imagine that probably other surrounding countries have some version of this story as well. I read a book about this over the summer, so I do have a little bit of knowledge. But yeah, most famous in Thailand. It really has become a Thai story. Actually, yeah, I should say this too. There's kind of a version of this story in Chinese tradition in East Asia, except instead of a woman, it is one of these serpent spirits who, so a slightly different variation, but similar themes. Again, it's called Nang Nak. What does Nang Nak mean? It means Miss Nak. And she's sometimes called Mai Nak, which just means Lady Nak. Sometimes it's spelled with two A's, meaning it's not knack, right? Like a tack, but it's nak. It's a long A. La, nak. So she's Mai Nak, Nang Nak, and her husband is named Mak, which is probably going to confuse you. But they're basically the only two characters. There's some monks too. And in the movie, it's a very famous monk. In the version we read here, they don't tell us any monk's name. So these are the only two names I ask you to know. Should be pretty easy. Maybe since I've been talking so very much, maybe I'm going to show you a quick video and then we can do a little discussion. How does that sound? Sound good? All right, so let's just take a peek about what this is all about. So this is a random video I found. Maybe I'll just talk over it. ThaiWebsites.com. And so here is as far as I can tell, I have no idea where this video comes from, but as far as I can tell, it's basically like a tourism kind of snapshot of the fun things you can do, going to this Wat Mahabut, which almost certainly is Mahabodhi, the Great Enlightenment Temple. And so you can go to this shrine. There's a sacred pillar, question mark. So the person who made this video is not particularly informative, but I like their energy. They're excited to be there. So here we're entering the shrine of Mai Nak. Do we know who she is? Lady Nak, the star of the show, right? So this is what we're going to discuss in a moment, is who is she and what's her deal and why are people going to her shrine? Let's see, is the sound interesting? Let's pause for a sec. And again, this is a real life space, right? This is a lived religious space. A lot of the things, for example, the Book of Spells, that's gone. That's archaeological. People have forgotten about that, right? Nobody does that very particular practice anymore. As you can see, here's a guy in the space, making an offering, saying a prayer, that sort of thing. As you can see, here is Mai Nak, Nang Nak in the middle. Here is her unborn child. And again, if you didn't do the reading and you don't know the story, you might be very confused right now. But she's a ghost. And so she is not a Buddha. She's not a Bodhisattva. She's a ghost. And these are people making offerings to a ghost. And again, it might be kind of bad mojo to be sure. I guess we got a cross here that'll sort of keep us safe here. But it is a little bit bad mojo. I'm surprised I found this video, honestly. I'm surprised people actually make this video. Maybe this is enough. I guess we can see he's making an offering to her. And one thing we'll discuss is why. Why are people making offerings to her? Mai Nak can watch TV, right? And again, it's sort of a silly caption, but it tells us something a bit of how people think about this space. She is very real, right? This is not some pretend fairy tale or something. This is not like, Ariel, the Little Mermaid. And the connection is made to Little Mermaid here. I kind of like that connection, actually. If we think about what is a Naga, right? What are these dragons? Little Mermaid's pretty close. But she's very different from a Little Mermaid, right? This is a very real presence, a very real spirit. People go there looking for blessings, looking to get lucky, right? This is a space where you can get lucky numbers to win the lottery. And here's Ganesh. Do you guys know who Ganesh is? He's the elephant god. He's actually a Hindu god, so it goes to show it's kind of ecumenical, many different traditions. Here's a Buddha, of course. Guan Yin in the foreground. I want the tarot reading, so all kinds of stuff going on here. And I wanted to show you this too. Here's Guan Yin, right? And so it's another female Buddhist figure that we might be able to fruitfully compare with Nang Nak. Okay, maybe that's enough. So that's what we're talking about today. Maybe we can start with the shrine and think about what's going on with the shrine. Why are people going there? Why are they making offerings to Nang Nak? Isn't that a little bit weird and creepy to be doing that? And so why are people doing that? First of all, also, what is the story? So tell the story to each other. If you don't know what it is, page 124. And then finally, is this Buddhist magic? What maybe a way to think about this is, where does Buddhism come into this story? Because again, that's the extra credit question. That's a question we'll discuss, but maybe not answer definitively, but I want to give you a chance to discuss. So these are your questions. This is what we will discuss. Any questions for me before we do it? Questions for me? If you guys want to talk with each other, you can. All right, let's do a breakout room. It's 8:30. Let's maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Tell us the story really succinctly. Did you guys go over it? What is the story here? Let's do the chat. You guys got anything? Connor, were you about to talk?
Nope.
Nope. Running away. Did anybody in the chat want to tell the story? Otherwise, we can we can go to the in-person team.
So basically this young woman falls in love and she becomes pregnant, and then her husband basically like has to go into the military, and she dies in childbirth, and so her spirit and her baby's spirit like taunt the husband and his like new wife, and some say that he became a monk, some say he has like a new family, and Nong Nok like basically brings like fortune to the community, so that's why people believe in her. And she gives out like winning lottery tickets, gives like fertility and stuff like that. So they believe in her because she does like good acts for the community.
Okay, Cameron hit most of the main points. So one thing I'm going to push against is Mok is his name, right? He goes off to war. He comes back. He actually does not remarry immediately, right? So everything Cameron set up is absolutely correct. He goes off to war. He's conscripted, right? You guys know this word, conscription. He's forced to go into war. As he comes back, he's greeted by his loving wife and child, but there's something weird about them. What is weird about them? Are they really his loving wife and child? They're ghosts. Dun, 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 right? And so that's the real upshot of the story. And it's the beauty of the movie. Spoiler alert, but you know that's the nature of this. He doesn't know that she's a ghost, right? And the movie kind of unfolds it very slowly, and people try to warn him, and he's like, "Nah, she's not a ghost. You're crazy. I'm gonna, you know." And he gets mad. He's like, "How dare you call my wife a ghost? How dare you call my baby a ghost? I'm gonna kill you," right? Even though it's his friend, he gets mad at him, and then Nong Nok, again, spoiler alert, kills them, right? And so that's why it's a horror film. Is she wants to protect her husband from this knowledge. And I'll stop spoiling it for you, but I do have a clip from it. If we have time, we could watch it. Otherwise, you can watch the whole thing on your own. So yeah, that's the main story, right? Is she's a spirit. She loves him, right? And so it's kind of a heartbreaking film because it's the love that brings them together. It's the love that pushes her to murder. It's the love that leads to the supernatural situation, dangerous situation, right? And so it's not clean, right? It's not a clean story. It's not a clear bad guy. You really, especially in the film, you feel for her, right? And just like Cameron was saying, there is a sense like she's actually kind of a good guy, even though she was this murderous ghost, powerful, dangerous ghost. At the same time, she can also do good for the community if you treat her right. Gentlemen. And so that really is the power of this figure. And I could rant more and more about why this matters, but maybe I'll give you guys more of a microphone. Why do you think people make offerings to her? I guess Cameron sort of answered that, right? She gives good fortune and good luck if you make offerings to her. One thing I asked my group that I didn't put in the slides here, what makes her special? How to phrase it? What about the fact that she is a woman transforms her? Why does it matter that she's a woman? It does matter, first of all. But what changes when she becomes a woman? Okay, I'll let you keep thinking about that if you don't have any thoughts. Sydney? Mm-hmm. Very good. So if you couldn't hear, Sydney's pointing out she died in childbirth, right? This is a woman's story, right? It could not be a man's story. Men don't die in childbirth. I mean, maybe they do in very rare examples, but I think it's pretty uncommon. And so, yeah, the fact that she died in childbirth is kind of a core element to this story. Maybe I can jump. Yeah, this we already talked about. You make offerings of incense and flowers and fresh fruit, also toys and diapers and milk bottles for the baby. And so maybe I'll put these out. As a man making offerings, you know, you can think, you know, it's almost like this romantic gesture. There are images of her where she's this beautiful young woman, right? She's not some horrible ghost. That's not the way she's represented. There are dresses being offered to her. And so women can also think it's almost like giving a gift to a friend, right? This is not like going to church and giving alms to the church or something like that. This is something a bit more socially meaningful, right? You are giving a gift to what feels like a person, right? It doesn't have a body, but you're giving a gift to a being of some kind. People pray to avoid military conscription. Does that make sense? Do you think she would like military conscription? No, she would hate it, right? So she will use her powers to prevent other people from being conscripted into the military. Very interesting, right? It makes me think about, again, I'm not an expert of Thailand, but there's probably a lot of war in the 19th century. That's what this story is kind of founded on. And yeah, kind of ambiguous about fertility. Cameron brought this up in the video. I think it said you could sort of pray for fertility, or at least in some other sources I've read. In the reading, though, it says she's let's just say ambiguous. Expectant mothers are often advised to avoid visiting her for obvious reasons. What are the obvious reasons? Why are expectant mothers, so pregnant women, are advised not to visit her? Why do you think that is? This is a story of loss, right? Of lost children. You don't want to mix those streams, right? Obviously, it's giving cultural space to what Chrissy Teigen was trying to give cultural space to, which again is something we push down along with all the other magical stuff and don't allow in our ego or super ego or whatever. It remains in the unconscious. But yeah, here it's giving space to this pretty ugly, difficult, suffering, right? This is the theme of the class, difficult part of human life, human existence, particularly for women, for the lives of women, is giving space to that. But you don't want to mix this with life, right? This is the story of death. And so when you're trying to create life, you got to keep those things separate. And so pregnant women do not go there. The author of this, I don't know who she is. Her name is Ka F. Wong. I think she assumes that this is actually more obvious than it is. I don't know if it's totally obvious, but hopefully it's more clear now. Does that make sense? Again, it's creepy to even just tell this story. I was asking one of the groups if this is creepy to anybody, and it's supposed to be, right? That's why it makes sort of a powerful movie. Questions about this temple and what people do here? Is that pretty clear? So coming back to this question of femininity, there's a particular type of spirit that Nong Nok is based on. It's the spirit of those who suffer violent death. Now, why would somebody who dies a violent death be more likely to become, let's just say, a ghost? Does that make sense to anybody? Jocelyn? Yeah, it's pretty sudden, right? Have you guys seen, what is it called? Sixth Sense? Well, I won't say anymore, because if you haven't seen it, it'll sort of ruin the movie for you. So I won't say anymore. But it's not, let's just say it's not unique to Thai culture, right? I think even though it's sort of a magical idea, there is some logic to it. Like if you just put yourself in the shoes of the deceased person, I'm just walking along, going to school, listen to my headphones, step out in front of traffic. Oh my God, right? And so I would be a little surprised that I was just disembodied, right? And so especially, again, you have to believe in spirits, of course, but if there's some sudden separation of your spirit from your body, what was that Pixar movie? Soul plays with this idea too. It's much more family friendly than Nong Nok. But yeah, similar concept, right? The spirit becomes dissociated from the body and is confused, right? And might even be mad, particularly if somebody kills them, right? If they have some reason to get revenge or something they're sort of holding on to. So anyways, we see that coming up here. And so anyways, these spirits, they're the most vicious fiends, especially women who die painfully in childbirth with the baby still undelivered. Why do you think especially women dying in childbirth? Why do you think they are especially vicious fiends, as this article calls them? What's the emotional state of a woman who dies in childbirth? Can you even imagine? I know that's a big ask. You don't have to if you don't want to. But again, these are important topics, right? These are part of human existence, right? And to leave them out is not doing ourselves any favors, I don't think. What do you think that would feel like? what emotions are happening there? What emotions happen with a successful childbirth? Obviously, I don't think any of us have personal experience, but let's imagine. What do you think it would be like to successfully have a child, right? The moment of giving birth, right? That precise moment. What do you think that feels like? Probably happy from the dad's perspective. Not so hard, was it? Okay, all done. What about from the mom's perspective? Pretty cool. If you couldn't hear, Jocelyn said it might be a little piece of magic, and I think that's a perfect word, right? I mean, something crazy is happening right there. You know, at the beginning, you are one thing. At the end, you are two things, right? Which then are obviously very much attached and attracted to each other and that sort of thing. But yeah, there is a major magic that goes on there. And, you know, the next few months we'll be negotiating that separation. Arguably the next many years down to perhaps the entire life, right? Something we all have to negotiate, in fact. Yes, there is definitely some magic that happens here. And now we can think, what happens if that is interrupted? Right? It would be so heartbreaking. So heartbreaking. And that moment that emotion is really what fuels this film. That is what keeps Nong Nok grounded in this world, right? That's what prevents her from going to the other side. Being separated from her child, and it's sort of shifted into the movie. It's love for her husband, which again might feel a bit patriarchal, probably because it is. So we have the good wife or mother versus the evil seducer or monster. Which one do you think Nong Nok is? Is she the good wife / mother, or is she the evil seducer / monster? If you had to pick one, which one do you pick? I wrote it a little more ambiguously. How do these categories apply to her? What do you think? We talked about evil seducers before, didn't we, in Buddhism? Who are some seducers, some temptresses? Mara's daughters, yeah. Is she evil seducer monster from what you've read so far? Maybe we can start with just the word temptress. Is she a temptress, a seducer? Does she seduce people? Yes or no? Not really. Does she do? She sort of seduces her husband a little bit, don't you think? She tricks him. Would you agree with me? Watch the movie and this will make more sense to you. I feel like the 4-page description doesn't quite do the story justice. But these are things you can think about as you're watching the movie. Is she evil from what we've read about her? She can be. How is she evil? She kills people. Killing people's evil, guys, right? Don't you think so? I mean, but at the same time, we can also connect with her, right? What about the good wife mother side? Is she a good wife mother? Would you say she is a good wife? No, why not? When she was alive, she was. Was she a good mother? Yeah. I can speak for the patriarchy now. She is the ideal wife. She loves him even beyond the grave. She loves him forever. That's the best kind of wife, right? There's no question about her love. She loves him so much that she won't leave him even in death. Imagine that. Someone who loves you so much that even when they die, they won't leave you alone. I know in American society, we want space or whatever, right? But in let's just say patriarchal society, that's not what you want. You want someone who's devoted to you. That's all you really want. And again, power dynamics, blah, blah, blah. It is a patriarchal story, no doubt. But she's most definitely a good wife, according to the patriarchy, no doubt, right? And a good mother, too. She takes care of the baby. Okay, we're basically out of time. There's more to say about this, but again, I like giving you guys cliffhangers. Here's a clip from the movie. where Nong Nok is standing on the ceiling and talking to a monk upside down. Very famous scene, very creepy scene. And I was going to show it to you, but maybe I'll let you guys watch it in your own time. Or we can watch it next time. So we are out of time. Like we discussed, and Sam reminded me, we won't meet Thursday. We won't meet Monday. We will meet a week from Wednesday. Yes, we'll get back to back. That's right. So I'll give you guys some movie clips and some discussion time. Don't worry, it'll be fun. Okay, so any questions, anybody? Hopefully I didn't creep you out with the ghosts too much. Like I said, if we look at them in the right way, they are a part of our lives, whether we want them to be or not. Okay, goodbye. Have a good day.